Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP Security. In this session, we will be discussing about settings for role maintenance. The first one which we would like to discuss about is a parameter for profile generator. This is a default parameter for profile generator. By default, it is anyway set to Y. This is a parameter which is mainly related to profile generator. This profile parameter should be Y. That means if the profile parameter is auto/no check in some cases, this should be Y. What is profile parameter? Profile parameters are some parameter settings which can change the behavior of your SAP systems. There are quite different profile parameters. Okay, let's check in the system, then you will understand how does this profile parameter works. To check that specific profile parameter, we can go to RZ11. Our parameter name is AUTH slash star. So this is our profile parameter name. Authorization slash no check in some cases. In each profile parameters, you will have a documentation which says what exactly this parameter does. This is a documentation for this parameter. It says you must set these parameters to Y if you use the profile generator. If you use PFCG, then this should set to Y. This profile generator used for authorization default value, which you can maintain in SU24. So whatever you maintain in SU24, if you are going to use that one, then we need to use this profile parameter. If we switch this off, that means if you change the profile parameter value to no, then the authorization checks in SU24 will become invalid. It will switch it off. And this also recommends that some cases, if you don't use HR authorization, then you can simply disable it. So authorization check for S underscore T code are anyway protected, so it doesn't matter, and also gives you some more information that if you want allow all values in any authorization field, then you mention it star, which already know, meaning to say that each profile parameters have its own documentation. We can find out this use of each parameter using this documentation. So the transaction code to come to this profile parameter is RZ11. Then you specify the parameter value and say display, then it will give you the details. There is one more transaction called RZ10. Here what happens is you can maintain the profile parameters here. By standard in SAP, you have 3 different profiles. In these profiles only we will maintain these parameters. These profiles are actually saved as a file in the operating system. So whenever SAP starts, then it will read these profiles, and based on the parameter value, and it will change the behavior of the SAP system. We have 3 different kinds of profile: default, instant, and startup profile. So in our case, this should be Y. PFCG default values. We already seen this topic before. The default value which comes from SU24, the default value which comes while you are assigning one user in the PFCG, the role, for that means when we are inserting any transaction code in the role menu, then it brings the default values for this specific transaction code to the authorization profile. These values actually coming from your SU24 setup. So whatever the SU24, whatever we have specified in SU24 are populated into the role whenever we assign the specific transaction code into the role. That is, so if that values is not 100% complete, then you know we have 3 different type of color code. Based on the color code we can identify what is missing. Next we would like to talk about the default table. How does the SU24 is being displayed? By default, whenever SAP delivers the software, it has two tables, USOBX and USOB2. This is a SAP standard default table which is delivered by SAP, which has all the detail related to authorization checks for each transaction code which is used in SAP. So these two tables will determine what is being checked during the execution of a particular transaction code. Also what is the authorization objects which is used in your profile generator, as well as what is the proposed values whenever you add a transaction code to your menu into profile generator, or if you go to SU24 and check what is the proposed values. So it all comes from these two tables. However, SAP also provides you an option that you can customize the standard authorization checks. It means you can change the values which is visible in your SU24. For that, what SAP does, it has two different table, USOBX underscore C, that means for customer, USOBT underscore C. These two tables are almost equal to the other two tables, but this is used by SAP standard, this is used by customer. So what happens is, during the implementation of SAP, that you run a transaction code called SU25, which gives you an option that you copy all the default value from this table to the customer table. Why do we need to do that? If let's assume that I wanted to change the authorization checks which is available in SU24 for some transaction code, then I can specify only here. So what it does, what this SU24 does, that it will copy all the SAP default value to this one, meaning like a duplication of these two table it will create, and we can modify the changes here. That means the effective changes for the customer is available here. The default values which is delivered by SAP is still available. So in point in time that we wanted to see what is the actual default value, then we still have this reference. So after you copying and you change something in this some of the transaction codes, then you would like to see what is being checked for the specific transaction code using the transaction code SU24, then the value which will be displayed, which is based on these two customer table. This is the check when it is being done during SU24. So we have the customer table here, which is identified as underscore C, which has all the values which we changed based on our requirement. Whenever you run SU24 and put one transaction code, and so it picks up the values from here. Let me remind you, this is based on the old, that means pre-ECC SAP system till 4.7. it is maintained it like this. In the new SAP ECC, it is maintained differently. Let's check in our system, so it will be quite easy to understand. let's go to the transaction SU01, which is quite easy for us to understand. So here, if the proposal says yes, then this is been checked. If the proposal says no, then this is not checked. Okay, so the authorization objects required for SU01 is based on if this should say yes, and we should have the check in this column. If we say check yes, then this is the proposed authorization object. And this field TSTCA, this is a new one which is available in the latest SAP. This shows object is checked at start. That means whenever this particular symbol which is available, then this particular object will be checked at start while starting the transaction code. So based on the SU24, the system proposed yes means that this authorization object or the proposed authorization object from SAP. So this one we can change these values. To change a specific object in this transaction code, we can simply select this object. Right now we are in display mode. Go to the change mode. When you are in change mode, then you can change the values by one. Then let's say instead of 08 this should have been something else, then I can change it here. Then it will say I added one more. So I need to have 03, I need to have 01 and 02 and 03. This is what it means. So if you wanted to add an additional object, you can still add an additional object. First we need to I don't want 01. Now if I want to add an additional object, we can simply add it here and add an additional object, then we can do the modification whatever is required. The SU24 we already seen in our previous exercise that we put a transaction code, then we have some indicators. It says check and yes or no. If it is mentioned it as yes, then that particular authorization object is going to be checked. If it is mentioned it as no, then it is not going to be checked. If it is checked, then we need to get down to the fields and check what is the value which is being proposed in this SU24. Let's go to the system to see, then it will be more easy to understand. Okay, in our system, just go to SU24. Then you select the application which is transaction and go to put the transaction code SU01, then you execute. When you execute, then you got lot of authorization objects, then you have some indicators here. The first indicator is a new indicator, it's a very useful one, TSTCA. In the latest SAP you will find this one. In this TSTA, okay, here we have one here. Let's say for example this authorization object yes_user_GRP, this is for user master maintenance user group. If this is marked then this particular object is going to be checked whenever you run su01. So it will check s underscore t code, immediately it's going to check this object. If this object is not there, then you cannot enter it at all. So the su24 initial screen itself, it behaves based on what is mentioned in this particular transaction code. So it is a mandatory authorization object. That's what it means. So let's say if you do not have this another authorization object, still you can get inside su24. Sorry, you can still get inside su01. If this authorization object is not there, then you cannot get inside su01 at all. That's what it means. The next column is to identify whether this is been checked or not. And the third column is, this is the proposal. Okay, proposal means su01 proposed this one. That does not mean that these authorization objects are mandatory to have it. We already seen in our previous exercise that during su01 user creation and assignment, we only used these four from here to here, only these four authorization object. Without other authorization object which is proposed here, we can still run su01 and do some transaction codes. So this is a proposal, does not mean this is a mandatory requirement. So we need to go and understand each authorization object to come to a conclusion whether it is really required or not. This is the SAP proposal. That's the reason SAP is flexible enough to give us an option that we can disable if you don't like it. Let's say in our su01 we come to a conclusion that we don't need this one, these two. First one is system specific assignment, second one is for the central user administration. Let's assume I don't use central user administration at all in my system landscape. So why do I need to have this authorization object included whenever I add su01 to my profile? So what I will do is I will just simply select this. I will go to change mode. Now we have change mode. I can change it to no. When you change it to no, it will create a transport request. This will be a workbench change. You need to create a transport request and transport to different systems. But if you see here that you cannot change, it is already grayed out. Even though I am in change mode, I cannot change this. So this is a mandatory object which will be checked while executing su01. This is really useful. Actually, the best way to start authorization development is like what we did in our previous exercise. Provide as minimum as possible. So if you don't know all this authorization object, what are all going to be, and you could not come to a conclusion what are all the authorization objects required, from this you already have an idea what is minimum required. So let's say I only need this authorization object and I will start with this, meaning to say you give as less as possible, then test it. If it is not working, add the authorization which is additionally required, same like what we did. The other way, if you assign all this authorization to one user and you don't know what is this authorization object are going to do, after that if the user have lot of other authorizations, it will be very difficult to identify what all the additional authorization which is available with this user and how we can remove it. So identifying that kind of authorization object is going to be a very difficult job. So the best practice is always assign authorization as minimum as possible. Then you run the business scenario. When user test the business scenario, if they find it some errors, then add additional authorization. The reason is from one transaction code we can switch to different transaction code, same like we did in su01. We go to su01, from there we go to user group creation, so we switch to a different transaction. Like let's say I go to su01. So right now we are in the initial screen of SU01. So when we created user group, instead of going to the transaction code directly, we went to environment, create user group and maintain. So we switched from that transaction code to another transaction code. So if I go to the status, so this is a different transaction code called SUGR. Same like this functional also we have different transaction codes. Let's say we will go to IW51, create notification. Let me select some. If you see in the screen, now we are in the notification screen. So once we key in all the information, okay, we wanted to create the notification, then the same screen we decided, okay, we wanted to create a service order with reference to this notification. If you see this button, service order, you click this, then it will create the service order. If you see, to create service order we have a separate transaction code which is IW31. But from IW51 notification creation, you can click this button, you can directly go to that program, you can trigger that program. Same like that, we have sales order VA01. So instead of going to VA01 and creating a sales order, we can create a sales order from here with reference to this notification. So like this in SAP you can switch from one transaction code to another transaction quite easily. So let's come back to our SU24. SU01. So it is very important that we identify all the authorization object only for that specific transaction code, then we can assign to that. So the additional over assignments of authorization object may lead to an additional problem that the user will have more authorization, then user can switch to different programs even though if they don't have that specific transaction code assigned to them. So we have seen we can change this authorization objects here. Let's say I go to change mode again. If let's say I wanted to add an additional authorization object to this transaction code, we can simply say add here, then put a object name, then we can add. If you have your own customized authorization object, also you can add it here. Or let's say in my case I wanted to add a field, I wanted to change an SAP standard proposed field values. Let's say this one. So we have the field values. If you remember, we use these field values to assign something. Here we think, okay, 03 and 08 is not enough, or we need to do some changes, then we simply click here. And you wanted to add something else, then we simply select this and say save. Then this will be the next proposed values. So when you add SU01 next time in P of CG, then this will be the proposed value. I don't want to do that, say no. Okay. So this is SU24. Let's say if you wanted to see an authorization object instead of SU01, I want to know one specific authorization object where and all is going to be used. Let's take it like this. Let me take one authorization object from here, s underscore user underscore grp. I want to know this authorization object is related to what. I got only this authorization object when I run some SU53 or some when we are identifying some issues, then I want to know this authorization object is used for what. Then I will go to this tab and put this authorization object, and I want to know it's related to what are all the transaction codes. So I'll select the transaction code, say execute. Now I got a quite many applications. Then let me check here, filter it by proposal, yes. Then I got more better results. So this particular authorization object being proposed by many transaction code, SU53, SU56, so it SU01, SU01D, there's so many transaction code checks this specific authorization objects. Then, and we can also see there are some authorization objects, even initial screen it is checking. BPO application measurement maintains license attributes of roles. That's many transaction code which is checking. SU01, which we already seen, SU01D. SU01D is for display only. We don't have SU013. We have SU3, which is for maintaining your own authorizations. So SU01D is for display. SU10 and SU12, quite many transaction codes are using this particular authorization objects. So if you want to know more, then we can simply click this information button, then it gives the detail of this authorization object and what it does, and detail of each and every activity. So this is a very important transaction code, SU24. Now we know if you have a transaction code, how to check all the related authorization objects. If we have an authorization object, we can check all the related transaction codes. Let's come back to our presentation. So next transaction code which we are going to see is SU22. This is for SAP default check. Means in SU24 whatever the output what we get after, it is from the customer table. So once you change some values, that is the one which you get it from SU24. Then let's say you wanted to use SU22. You wanted to check, let's say you wanted to check what is SAP standard proposed values, then we can use SU22. Let's go to our system and run /n SU22. This also looks almost same like SU24. Then we put the transaction code and run. We got the authorization object which is delivered by SAP. Actually this is a fresh system, we did not change much, so that's the reason it's showing the same. But if you have changed something, then it will show quite big difference. Now why do we need to check the SU22? What is the situation it will come? You may think like that. Why do we need to check SU22? Anyway, we are the one who changed SU24. Why do we need SU22? You need SU22 in case you are upgrading the version or EHP upgrade. The time of EHP upgrade or the normal upgrade, you can still do SU25. This is standard steps. We will come in the next session, we will be seeing that. However, if you want to know during the upgrade phase, you will always like to know what was the previous authorization object used for this specific transaction code. then you can compare what is the additional authorization objects added. Then you can come to a conclusion, okay, this is the additional authorization object, this is the transaction code, and how many roles I need to add. So if you want to do this kind of analysis and stuff like this, then you may require this SU22 to check what was the authorization objects which was delivered initially. Or if let's assume we have already messed up the SU24 and you wanted to put it back to the SAP default, then we can use SU22 and put it back to SAP default. These are all the situation we may require SU22. Otherwise, in a fresh system, this should be same. Then this will be, for as far as I am concerned, this SU22 will be quite useful when you are doing upgrade. With this, we are coming to the end of the session. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.